Well, it is 7 o'clock. So everyone that's here, call the meeting to order. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening, Len. We have a presentation. We'll start right off with Matt, the 2022 end of year financial report.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Please note that these are going to be unaudited numbers. Audit numbers won't be available until June. This report compares 2022 actual performance to the 2022 revised budget. And the purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of the 2022 financial performance, and then additional information for 2023 and 2024 projections will become available over the next few months. And these three things together kind of help form context for future budget discussions. This is a kind of a summary of the general fund. As you can see, revenues are favorable to estimate by about 8.5% or 1.4 million. Expenditures favorable by to the estimate by about 1.9% or 325,000. Ending fund balance increased from 50% of expenditures to 53% of expenditures. If you adjust this for origination fees and development agreements, fund balance is around 51%. This breaks down the $1.4 million variance in revenues. And if you look at it, about approximately half of it's actually going to be due to one-time development revenues. If you can see, licenses and permits are 90% or 300,000. Then down on the other miscellaneous and transfers, that includes 315,000 for origination fees. This slide kind of shows the revenues over time. We're becoming more reliant on volatile sales and use tax. Despite the increase in total sales tax collections, we're continuing to see sales tax leakage. One thing we do to measure this is we get reports from the state that measures income-adjusted trade pull factors. And essentially what that means is anything that's less than a 1 means Gardner residents are choosing to spend some of their dollars in other communities. So in 2020, trade pull factor was 0.79. 2021, it was 0.82. And we've been seeing this kind of nice trend where it's been going up, but unfortunately in 2022, it dropped back down to 0.74, basically back to pre-pandemic levels. It's disappointing, but I mean, it basically shows that during the pandemic, people were shopping here locally at fast food and groceries. And then when things kind of got back to normal, they decided to go out shopping in other communities. For general fund expenditures, that $325,000 variance was out of a budget of $16.8 million. So generally we spent what we said we were going to spend. Expenditures over time. If you look at general fund expenditures in 2020, they're actually lower than the prior years, like 2019, due to budget cuts that were implemented during the pandemic. 2021 expenditures restored some of these budget cuts and returned to normal spending levels. What this means is we're no longer freezing positions and some of those operational cuts were restored. 2021 expenditures were 2.5% higher than 2019 expenditures, which means 3 of those years that were essentially flat for expenditures. But then in 2022, we had basically a 15.8% increase. This was large part due to the $1 million transfer to the CIP reserve, and that was for the 167th Street corridor preliminary plan and final design on some parts of the corridor. Other things that impacted it were inflation, which was 5.7%. We also had a 3% COLA adjustment for employees, and then we had wage adjustments for sworn officers, and those all contributed to that higher percent. So general fund balance went from 50 to 53%, but if you actually look at it in 2021, we're at 7.1 million, and it went up to 8.8 million in 2022. But keep in mind about most of that was due to revenue coming in higher than expected, and about half of that $1.4 million was due to development revenue, which can't really be relied upon in future years. In the electric fund, basically both revenues and expenses were inflated due to higher energy prices. Revenues were favorable by about 3.7 million, expenses unfavorable by 7.5 million. And these huge variances are due to, basically budget was based on early estimates, projected about $3 million surplus, but due to higher energy prices, we ended up with a shortfall of about 863,000. Despite the operating shortfall, ending fund balance as a percent of expenditures increased from 51% to 53%. And here's a breakdown of the actual expenses variance. About 5.6 million was due to electric wholesale purchases, 700,000 to commodities, that's meters and materials that we had to basically order in bulk and way ahead of time to make sure that we didn't disrupt our development projects, and this is all due to supply chain issues. We also spent $700,000 on 2 large vehicles. Typically, we would lease these, but when we looked at it this time around, the interest costs were higher than we wanted to see, so we decided to purchase them with cash. Then capital expenses, 500,000 unfavorable variance, and that was due to the combustion turbine controls upgrade project coming in higher than early CIP estimates. This graph shows revenues, expenses, and capital improvements over time. You can see 2021 was much higher than the other years. That's due to the polar vortex event that inflated both revenues and expenses. But if you look at 2022, it's still considerably higher than 2020, and that's due to higher energy costs. In 2021, the actual fund balance was about 13.6 million. At the end of 2022, it was about 12.7 million. We also have the capital reserve fund for about 3.2 million. Overall, we still have a strong fund balance in the electric fund. With the recent decrease in electric rates and suspension of power cost adjustment, we expect to see operating shortfalls continue in the future. This is, of course, part of our multi-year plan to reduce fund balance while reducing energy bills for Gardner residents and businesses. In the water fund, revenue was unfavorable by 6.8% or 640,000. Expenses were favorable by 21% or 2 million. And these are kind of due to timing of capital projects on the revenue side. We were planning to issue temporary notes to help fund the design of the new water transmission line, but that project got delayed, so we didn't issue the temp notes, so we didn't have that revenue come in. And then, in addition to that delay of that project, we also delayed the design of the intake structure at Hillsdale Lake, 183rd Tower Rehab, and the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant filter media replacement. So the timing of those projects kind of affected these variances. In 2022, you can see the debt proceeds for the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant expansion. And then also if you look at 21, 22, that kind of dark red kind of shows you how the debt service jumped up in those related to that project. The other kind of note is expenses were higher in 21, and that was mostly due to a one-time payment to Water One for the extension of infrastructure for Prairie Trace. The fund balance in water increased from 2.3 million to 3.8 million in 2022. And although the water fund balance appears strong, it's mostly inflated due to the delay of those capital projects. As we do those capital projects this year, and also debt service over time, will reduce the fund balance. In the wastewater fund, we had a small revenue variance that was favorable, about 230,000. And that was mostly due to system development fees and investment earnings coming in higher than expected. On the expense side, it was favorable by 13% or 800,000. And that was favorable due to a delay in the 2022 I&I program that's being rolled, and then it's going to be combined with 2023 I&I program. The ending fund balance went from negative 4% in 2021 to 160% in 2022. This next slide, this slide shows why. The main takeaway from this slide is the revenues in 2022 include the sale of our right-to-use asset of Big Bull Creek treatment plant, then also debt proceeds for general obligation bonds for Prairie Trace infrastructure, which was reimbursing us for prior costs that we've already incurred. So those two things led to a large increase in fund balance. We went from negative 385,000 to about 8.6 million. Now, typically we don't talk about some of these other funds quite yet in the budget process, but I wanted to bring them up because due to development, we're starting to accumulate some funds in them. So Park Improvement Fund, which is your park impact fees, is up to about 543,000. Special Parks and Recreation, which gets part of our alcohol tax. The alcohol tax goes basically a third to the general fund, a third to Special Parks and Recreation Fund, and a third to the alcohol and drug fund. Street Improvement, which is our street excise tax, is about 1.9 million. And then Economic Development Fund, our transient guest tax, is now up to about 330,000 in fund balance. Kind of in summary, general fund balance is above our 30% target at 53%. Electric fund balance is at 53%. Water fund balance is at 53% as well, but that's kind of inflated just due to timing of capital projects. Wastewater fund is at 160%, but this is all part of an intentional buildup to cover anticipated debt service associated with planned water CIP. Overall, at the end of 2022, our funds are fiscal condition is sound.
All right, thank you, Matt. Appreciate the work you did on the presentation. If council has specific questions related to this, keeping in mind, we'll have our retreat next week. We'll get into budget and some of those things. If there's specific questions relating to this or comments?
I got one.
Yes.
Matt, on the 5.6 million for electric for wholesale contracts, does that include Dogwood to offset?
I believe it does. Or it doesn't include the revenue offset there. Like we track our revenues and expenses through different line items.
So overall, even though wholesale purchases were up and natural gas expenses were up nationally, I was hoping that would help from a Dogwood perspective come back into us. Have we seen all
We
of
did
that
see an
come in?
increase in Dogwood revenues, but one thing you're going to see when our gas prices or our cost goes up, basically we see that expense immediately and we capture the revenues back over 12 months through the PCA. Well, historically we have.
So we're still
So there's a
lagging.
lag, yeah.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure. Thank you.
Thanks. Any further questions, Mark?
The only thing I had was about the grant revenue is obviously coming in fiscal year 2023 for the water treatment, correct? Oh, wastewater, I'm sorry, the wastewater. Is that going to allow us then to potentially put the kibosh a little bit, I think, on those 3.7% wastewater increases?
We're definitely going to do everything we can to reduce, rate increases. We're basically updating the CIP now, and we're going to use those fund balances. Some will be used towards paying the projects off before we issue debt. Some of the fund balance, like the sale from our right-to-use asset, will be helping mitigate rate increases by just having some funding available to carry debt service for a while.
Yep.
But is it going to eliminate rate increases? No, but it might mitigate it to some extent.
Yeah, I think we probably need to take a look at that. I know that we're intentionally building that up in order to be able to have the funds for the debt issuance for the wastewater project, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that we were pretty aggressive in that rate structure, given the fact we didn't anticipate the money from Big Bull Creek or the grants that we're getting. So
We did actually put those numbers in.
we did put those numbers in for that study. Okay. Nope, that's it.
Anyone else? Thank you, Matt, appreciate it. Okay, we have no public hearings, and I don't believe we have any public comments. No? Okay. So we'll move to consent agenda. Is there an item on the consent agenda you'd like to remove?
5 and 7.
Is there a motion for consent agenda items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6?
So moved. Second.
Motion Deaton, second Baldwin. We approve consent agenda items 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. All in favor?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? Those items pass. We'll start with consent agenda item number 5.
So I just wanted to ask if, I guess a two-part question. It said that the bid from Coleman was incomplete. Did we reach back out to find out if they intended to actually fill out that bid correctly, or why we didn't get an actual good bid from them?
Substantially lower.
Talking about item 4?
5.
5.
Purchase of a vehicle through the Sourcewell Cooperative Purchasing Program.
That's not received.
Sorry, what was the?
Did we reach back out for a bid? One of those bids was not.
I'm fine.
The Coleman piece goes with item number 4.
Maybe I said it wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't see it.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Sorry. Regardless. I know it's past now, but did we reach back out to them at all?
So that was.
So, under the standard bidding process, if we have information they need to provide, and it's stated fairly clear that they need to provide all the information. What they didn't, including the tax. Then the equipment they were proposing was less than the actual specs. So what's the reason they were disqualified?
Okay, I mean, that's fine. I was just curious if they're gonna take the time, I know there's sometimes games with bids, but if they're gonna take the time to fill it out and then didn't completely, if there was a reason they screwed up, they didn't fill it out right, if we should reach back out to them to find out why they didn't fill it out. That's all I was curious about.
But in this case, there was not only the lack of information, but the equipment was inferior than what we was
So
required.
that's fine. And then the second piece of that was, do we have enough of certain pieces of equipment, let's say track loaders, that it makes sense to look at having more of them of the same make for a maintenance standpoint, a training standpoint, operations, since like these two were two different companies, and there's Hitachi and Case and everybody else out there. So do we do that, and is there an advantage to doing so in the future?
So if I'm not mistaken, most of the front loaders are CAT. So the spec was based on a CAT front loader,
Yeah.
but they never bid. So
Yeah.
that's the reason we got this type of equipment.
Okay.
But the CAT is usually the standard.
Okay, great.
Any
Okay.
further on that one?
No.
Let's, we'll move to consent agenda item 7.
So the question on 7 is, with this apprentice program and the 4 raises that are tied into it, does that impact our rate structure for those positions? Would it have pushed somebody too far one way as time goes on?
No, and even if they get to the top of their pay grade for any reason, you can never be paid above the top of the pay grade.
Okay. All right, I'm good with both 5 and 7,
All right, so,
which was really 4 and 7.
right, we got to it eventually. All right, so do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
consent agenda items
Second.
5 5 and 7. Motion Baldwin, second Deaton. We approve consent agenda items 5 and 7. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? 5 and 7 pass. No planning and zoning consent agenda, no committee recommendations, no old business. Move to new business. New business item number 1, consider adopting an ordinance approving amendment to Title 15 Building and Construction, Swimming Pool Regulations, Zoning and Setbacks. Mr. Dave.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, tonight before you is a relatively, I'd say, easy change. As part of our administration of Title 15 Building and Construction chapter of the municipal code, we recently had an inquiry about a swimming pool being placed in a backyard. As we were reading through the regulations and looking at the permit, we came across some language that was relatively confusing, and what the language is intended to do is to prevent swimming pools from being placed in side yards of property. So when you first read this, it was talking about a pool being placed behind the front building line of the building and the rear building line of the building. With our setback requirements being at 9 feet and 20 feet, those are not going to change in the code, but simply with those two setbacks, most of our properties in Gardner are 5-foot and 7-foot setbacks, and then on corner lots are 10-foot setbacks. So the mere number 9 and 20 helps to regulate to keep those out of the side yards. The reason this came up is this really has to do with more like the pie-shaped lots that you get, the pie piece-shaped lots that you get at an end of the cul-de-sac where there's a narrow backyard, but there's a significant side yard, and what we had was a person that wished to place their pool kind of in that position, and they would not have been behind their back property or their back building line. So the language changes that you see before you are intended to take that language out that refers to the back building line. It retains the setback requirements, so there should not be significant changes there. And we also just wanted to clarify easements and right-of-ways, both public and private, that these pools should not be placed in either a public or a private easement. So with that, I'm open to questions.
Any questions from council? Comments?
One quick one, just applies to in-ground and not above ground. It's the only thing you need a permit for.
No, there are some above grounds that also require permits. And so when we look at pools, there's a whole series of pool regulations, including having them behind secured fencing and things like that that are safety regulations. So we do have requirements for both the in-ground pools and the above ground pools. Some of it has to do with the size and certain other elements though.
Okay. Do we have a motion for business item number 1?
So moved.
Second. Motion Shoot, second Baldwin. We adopt ordinance number 2763, an ordinance amending section 15.06.070 of the Gardner Municipal Code of the City of Gardner, Kansas, relating to swimming pool regulations.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Shute,
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin,
Yes.
Councilmember Ween,
Yes.
Councilmember Deaton,
Yes.
Ordinance number 2763 passes. Thank you. All right, we'll move to council updates. We'll start to my right with Don's Utilities.
Nothing tonight?
Jason Bruce, Parks and Rec.
Nothing tonight.
I do want to say thank you for, I noticed on the consent agenda, the trails around Quail Meadows Park, or connecting Quail Meadows Park. So I think that'll be very appreciated in a long time. They've been waiting on it. So
Yeah, we finally get to use that grant funding for
yeah,
it too.
it'll be great. That really will help to connect a lot of them out there. So. Dave.
We have, we have Planning Commission on Monday, the 27th, so this upcoming Monday. Something that will be coming forward that you've not seen before, the first few mobile food truck providers and their conditional use permits. So they've got a couple items before the Planning Commission. Those will come forward to you next month.
Thank you. Callum?
Nothing further tonight.
Let's go with our city administrator.
In preparation for our meeting next week, our goal-setting priority meeting, I'm going to be sending out some information tomorrow to the governing body that will include staff comments on the outline from the strategic plan that was done in 2018, and it'll ask for comments from the governing body on those same things. So I'm going to give you staff comments so that you can read them and get some background on where we're at on those things. But
Chief, I saved you for last, because I know you've got a big speech prepared. This is your last meeting. So, you probably don't, but I did save you for last.
That is correct. I do not have a speech prepared. However, we do have a CPAC meeting this Monday, 7 o'clock at the Gardner Justice Center Community Room.
All right, well, this is his last meeting, so don't be too rough on him.
We do have his retirement at 9 o'clock at the Justice Center next Friday. So,
10.
10, yeah. They told me 9, but, so I'll be there early.
They're gonna start at the preliminaries will start at 9.
We're gonna
Yeah.
pregame the,
Yeah.
It's the tailgate. It's the tailgate for his retirement.
Honestly, I needed help with the balloon. But I didn't want to tell anybody.
All right, we'll start with Councilman Wayne.
Nothing for me today.
Councilmember Roberts.
I have nothing, thanks for asking.
nothing tonight, thanks.
Council Vice President.
I wanted to thank the chief for his was it nearly 3 decades of service here at 25 years of service at the city of Gardner, and wish him well in his future endeavors. I know your wife is going to appreciate you being around more. You know, I'm being a little. Forget it. I'm not gonna say anymore. But we've really benefited from your stead working with us starting back in public safety and fire and working into the police chief position in the department. This you've got big shoes to fill, not just because you got big feet, but you've got big shoes to fill. Whoever comes in here to take your shoes, take your position. So thank you for the legacy you've left for the city. I really appreciate that, sincerely. That's all I had.
Council President.
I was just going to say something similar, but nothing about your feet. So thanks, Jay, for all of your service. We appreciate it.
And again, I'll echo the same. Thank you, Chief. I've been here for quite a while here. Appreciate everything you've done, and I'm sure you're going to look forward to your next chapter. So, we're glad that it sounds like you're going to be still in the community involved. So looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
Okay, with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Deaton, second Baldwin. We adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?